Welcome everybody. Whether or not you work for Madeira or Quext or Viva or Select or whoever else may be watching this, we want to welcome you to our first company podcast. I am Josh Haynes and I am the Director of Community Impact for both Madeira and Quext. And today we are going to engage in a great conversation with Dave Marcinkowski, one of our founding partners, and Dave Gillis, our Chief Executive Officer for both Madeira and Quext. For today, Dave M. and Dave G. are going to join us to discuss one of our three core values. We talk about, and you will see these on our website, you'll see them on some of our paraphernalia: Christ, community, and constant improvement. The one we're going to tackle today is community. Now, before we get to that, let me set this up and give you a little bit of a phrase that I think most of us will remember or at least have heard before. And the phrase goes, "No man is an island." I want to give us some context for that, though, because I'm not sure we all know the story. John Donne was an English poet, and he wrote this phrase as part of his essay, Meditation 17, in which he stresses the idea that no one is truly independent of others or independent from society, that we're all interconnected to some degree and in some fashion. And how we live in connection to one another has the possibility to bring out the best in humanity. It also has the possibility to induce more and more pain. Donne would go so far as to say that any one person's death is actually a loss for all of us, that is how interconnected we are. And so because of this, at the very minimum, we, Madeira, Quext, Viva, Select, we want to be a group of people who are constantly rooting for one another, doing our best to care for one another and to truly do servant leadership in all that we do, that no job is too small and no person is beneath us when it comes to how we treat them. That said, here is my conversation on community with Dave M. and Dave G. Hope you enjoy. Well, this is a new thing we're doing. We're starting this podcast. We're working to get out into conversations with our people, whether you are in Houston or DFW or here at Lubbock Corporate, or you work with us anywhere else, you invest with us. It doesn't matter who you are. We're trying to have these conversations. We want to bring the core values to the company and have a serious and in-depth conversation. The first core value that we're going to talk about is community, but there are three. We have Christ, community, and Kanai, constant and never-ending improvement, and we're going to start bringing those to the company and to anybody else who wants to listen and join us, talking about these things over the next several weeks, months, and because they're values over the next, well, this is what we do. It's who we are. So to begin with, we're gonna tackle this conversation of community, and to kind of jump into that, I first want to introduce you both because the big dogs are at the table today, and I'm gonna start with Dave M. Dave Marcinkowski, founding partner of Madeira, Quext, the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce for Lubbock. Is there any other major crazy things that you also do for our community?
I've got a problem with saying no, I guess. I've been a number of different volunteer organizations I'm a part of, and the Chamber is the current one that I'm spending a lot of time with, but school foundations, hospital foundations, former Texas Department Association president, Lubbock Department Association president of a number of committees here and there. And so I have a passion for it. I didn't realize it until I got into it, how much I enjoyed it. And so that's something I make a big part of my life.
Yeah.
Which I think fits into this word community that we're going to talk about today.
That was just about to say, I think no matter what we're doing, the fact that we're seeking community, that you're seeking communities, to be a part of our communities, that all fits into this conversation. The next guy I want to introduce across the table from me is Dave Gillis. He is the Chief Executive Officer for both Madeira and Quext. And I think kind of where I want to start with both of you is, how did you meet? How did you get here? Because I know a little bit of your backgrounds and you didn't start in the same places, even in the same industries. So, Dave M., I'm going to let you start with this conversation. Okay. And for the purposes of our audience, whether you're watching us or whether you are listening to us, I probably will refer to you at different points as the Daves: Dave M., Dave G., Dave Marcinkowski, Dave Gillis. I mean, just to differentiate.
Yeah, I'm Dave, and this is my other brother, Dave.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. So, Dave M., tell us how you guys met, how you guys kind of came to work together.
Yeah, it was about 4 or 5 years ago when we really started to look as an organization that we had grown to such a size we needed to find leadership help in a lot of different ways. And through that journey, I started meeting with and interviewing a number of people in Lubbock to help in those areas. We're looking for a chief financial officer, and I think Mike Nelson was the first person I talked to. Well, Mike reported to Dave. Mike, as we're having these conversations, I keep hearing Dave Gillis, Dave Gillis, Dave Gillis. I'm like, man, who is this guy? And then we hired John McNelly, chief marketing officer. And John used to work for Dave. And the same thing, Dave's name just kept coming up and coming up. And Larry Lafreniere works for us, same thing. And so finally I was like, man, I got to meet this guy. And so I asked them to make the introduction, and Dave and I met and had, probably what was meant to be a 30-minute conversation turned into probably like a 2.5-hour conversation. And, I knew that first conversation, this is somebody I really wanted to work with.
Yeah. And you've been working in the apartment industry for, how long have you been in the apartment industry?
I've been in the apartment industry, next year will be 30 years.
Oh, that's incredible. Okay, but across the table, you didn't come from the apartment industry. Where did you come from?
Where did you come from?
Yeah, where did I was born, no, we don't want to go back that far, do you? No, after college, I started out in public accounting. So I went with, at the time, was one of the big 8, which I think it's down to the big 4 today. But I joined a public accounting firm. I was in public accounting for about 13 years.
Oh, wow.
Anywhere from valuation group to mainline tax group to consulting group. Did a myriad of things, got to be in thousands of different companies, which was the blessing that I didn't realize I was getting until you kind of step back and say, oh my gosh, think of all the learnings that I got from just being in those thousands of companies. I went from there, I went to the cable industry, and it was actually in the year 2000, which at the time, high-speed internet was 1.5 megs down.
Yeah.
So it was just replacing dial-up, and I saw that as an industry that was evolving and was going to change the world, really. And I got in essentially on the ground floor of the internet, as well as VoIP, voice over IP, was also being launched at the same time. And so I did the cable industry for 17 years, and about 4 years ago, we had an event happen at our company where we had sold, and we had transitioned for 2 years to our new ownership group, and I was looking to do something different, and that's about the time Dave and I had the conversation, and we just clicked, and I wasn't afraid to jump into a new industry, but I'd also learned through my last 2 years, although they were the most economically beneficial to me personally, they were the most struggling to me. Yeah. And it was because who I was doing work with. And so I knew wherever I was going to go, I was going to be very particular in the people I went to work with. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters most. And I just felt this connection with Dave. I liked his style. I liked his thoughts. I liked his forward thinking, and at the end of the day, that's what it came down to. We just clicked, and let's go change the industry. We were open. I was open with Dave, and he certainly have been open with everyone that I was not from this industry. And so I was given the grace to spend some time to learn it before having to lead, and that was a blessing as well. But at the end of the day, all industries really come down to people.
Yeah.
And the different cogs that you can, or dials that you can turn, you can figure those out pretty quick. Yeah. The other thing is I think it allows me to not have to feel like I'm the expert, and actually rely on our experts who are out there doing it every day. And so you'll see me ask a lot of questions, and I really want the feedback. And I don't have necessarily, in a lot of cases, a preconceived notion of what we should do.
Yeah.
firm believer in wisdom of crowds.
Yeah.
And so I love to hear what people are thinking and then just kind of mash it together and say, okay, here's where we're gonna go.
Yeah.
But back to Dave, I think we just hit it off. We had a vision that we wanted to do some things differently. We definitely, Madeira has been and will be extremely successful, and just really liked all of the founding partners and what they stood for.
Yeah. Which is a huge conversation. What were you going to say there?
I was going to say there's a couple things that Dave said I'd kind of like to unpack a little bit. One, as you look at Madeira's evolution as a company, we have gone from, 3 or 4 guys, started as 3 and got to 4 partners that, kind of got into this apartment scene, different directions. And then as you kind of started to expand that out, it was mainly stay in your field. We were hiring more apartment people. As we've grown, I think the big part of community is if you keep doing that over and over again, you're going to limit your wisdom of the crowd, wisdom of community.
Yeah.
And it was kind of scary at first to hiring these people from these different industries. Like, we're in the apartment industry. This is hard stuff. This isn't what you're used to. I tell people all the time, you don't go to school to get in the apartment business, and so you got to kind of learn it. How are you guys going to do that? And what I learned really early on was they brought way more value to the table than the learning curve they had to overcome. And they've overcome the learning curve. But it coming in with this different perspective and asking these, well, why? Why do we do it that way? Have you thought about this? And a lot of times we didn't because we're stuck in our lane with like-minded people. And I think as we start to do this more and more, and that word diversity means a lot of things, but it also means diversifying, the types of people and their history of what they brought into our company. So I think that's a piece of community that needs to be kind of unpacked a little bit. My background with organizational structures and coming into working at Madeira, you kind of had some hierarchy where you had layers and things like that. And then I worked for a company that they really didn't have that. And I like that kind of that freedom per se. But what I started to realize there, but then also realized 4 or 5 years ago as we started to grow, you've got to have that structure. And I was probably resistant. When Dave came in, Dave would say, we've got to get clarity here. People have to understand roles and responsibilities, not from a standpoint of like we can't still collaborate and we can't still do things, but from a standpoint people need to know where they fit in that community. And I was, again, I kind of like pushed back on that initially. And I'm really glad that I learned that I was wrong because he's right. As we've grown, we have to have that kind of structure. And I'll let you talk about, what you did there.
Yeah, and so what I would say on that, you need to have structure, but you also still need to feel like everyone has their own business. Because at the end of the day, particularly how we deliver our product at the end of the day, it's at our communities, and that our community staff should feel like that's their business to run. Yeah. And corporate is here to support them. Not the other way around. You're not here to serve corporate. So if you hear anything from corporate that's not in line with that, that's against what we believe up here. And everyone we've hired understands we're here to serve the communities out there. Yeah. And the structure helps in that people know where to go to get help.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing. Now, do we have a lot of work still to do in that regard? Sure, because we've added a lot of people and we're going wide with a lot of different things. So we still have a lot of defining to do. And in some places, we just flat out have a hole in our organization and there's no one to catch what someone is throwing. And that can lead to some frustration. So we know that we still have some of those things out there to fix. But all in all, your structure is really just to give people comfort of where to go for help. It's not ever to be seen as a dictatorial, hey, if somebody's above you telling you to do something, you have to do it. That's not what it's for. It's really so you know where to go to get help.
Our community is the people that live in those apartments, but it's also our staff and our overall company as a whole. It's the vendors that we work with. It's the investors that we try to earn a return for. It's the brokers who help bring us the deals. It's And the what I like to use from an analogy, I had a mentor who taught me this, is like the still water, and you drop a pebble in the middle and you got these waves that just kind of branch out. We tend to get stuck in that first little drop of the pebble in there, and we forget that we really impact a lot of people. The people that you live in your property, well, they've got family and they've got friends. There's the community that they live in. There's the city that they live in, the state, or and it's the apartment associations. These are all communities that our organization touches, that we touch individually. And so you have to look at it holistically when you look at this value.
Yeah, I like what you said there, because I think there's a couple of things that come out of this when you start talking community. Everybody wants a place to belong. But when you live I guess to steal a phrase from elsewhere, when you live a purpose-driven life, part of what you're also doing is supposed to be living to help others belong.
Yes.
And find a place. When you think community and you start to use language around it, what do you typically say and bring up?
Yeah, Dave hit it right at the heart on that ripple effect. I think, early in my career, I was challenged to get out into a larger community, right? Go try to do good in organizations that are doing things in your community. And you do that because your boss asked you to do that. But just as Dave found out, it became a passion for me as well. So I've sat on many boards as well. I was on our school board for 8 years here in Lubbock, and involved in the chamber as well as the United Way. So to me, community is way bigger than what you start out with. But at the core, for us as a company, it does start out with your little group of workers in your department, your community. That's really the heart. And if you can be encouraging to each other to get out of your comfort zone and do a little bit more, whether it be on the community, hey, I see you really like to do this. Why don't you do that more? Yeah. And confidence is a crazy thing, and there's not. It's one of those things that's really hard for you as an individual to build up yourself. Sure. You sort of need people around you to help build your confidence. It's also really easy for people around you to tear you down on the confidence. But I would just say, first and foremost, we owe it to each other to help build confidence. And when you see somebody do something that's really good, tell them about it. It will help them want to do it more. And when you start to do the little things at your community and then challenge yourself to try to impact a bigger community, once you have the confidence, hey, that worked. I was able to influence this group. And really, it's influence is what you want to do. Influence in a positive way. Inspiration. So just, and just keep expanding your what world you're trying to, or what community you're trying to influence.
Yeah. To me, add on that real quick, because I love what Dave said about, celebrating when people are doing good things. On the flip side, and we'll talk about this more as we move along through these values, growth occurs in that space you're not allowed, that uncomfortable space. It's where real community exists is when somebody's hurting, or when somebody maybe is off a little bit, and you have the courage to be able to have a real conversation with them about them. That shows that you care about them enough. You could sit there and say, that's their deal. It's not my deal. That's not community. Community is when you go to them and say, hey, I can tell something's not right here, right? I'm not sure I agree with you here. Talk to me about it. And then you work through that together.
I think a lot of what we're talking about when it comes to community is we want every property, we want the corporate office, we want our interactions with investors, we want any interaction where corporate goes to the properties. We want people to feel safe, like it's a safe place to have that conversation, where we will also display servant leadership, like what you're talking about, and yet we want to hold people accountable to the values and to the purposes of what we're trying to accomplish. And all of that can happen together, but it's complex. Thank you so much for having joined us. That was part one of my conversation with the Daves, Dave Marcinkowski and Dave Gillis. We will have part two for you out and ready to watch shortly, or to listen to shortly. So with that said, remember that we desire to be a company that cares for one another. We desire to be a company that cares for our community. We desire to be a people who are constantly rooting for one another. Hopefully you will find this to be a great aspiration, not only as you do your work, but as you enter into your own personal relationships. Have a great day.
you.